What's up, guys? It's Liz Kelly, and welcome to the Ringer Podcast Network. April is a huge month for TV, and starting this weekend, the Recapables feed returns to give you in-depth analysis on your favorite TV shows, including Killing Eve, Billions, and many more. There will also be a special Pre-Capables series on the Recapables feed on the final season of Game of Thrones, where our staff forecasts what will happen every Sunday on the show. So make sure to subscribe now before the premiere of Killing Eve and Game of Thrones on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Basketball is very good. The Wizards underpaid John Wall. AD should re-sign with the Pelicans. The Nets actually won the Celtics trade. Basketball is very good.
Hello, hi, welcome to the Ringer NBA show. This is the group chat. I am Justin Verrier, and joining me as always, I'm going to start with one Paolo Uggetti, our very own playoff P.
Getting ready. Let's go.
He's ready. Also joining us, Haley O'Shaughnessy.
Let me put my contacts in real quick.
Yeah.
This will be a lot better.
As someone who has a slight stigmatism, I definitely I feel for him.
Same.
For Steph Curry is who we're talking about.
I'm going to go get my eye checked because Steph had a slump, found out that he would shoot better with contacts in. What did he say? Quote, "It's a whole new world."
Yeah, I'm wondering what he was doing like with his eye doctor beforehand. Was he just not seeing his healthcare providers?
Yeah. It sounded like from the story, from the Marcus Thompson story, that he had this basically condition that he'd never really taken care of, I guess, where you can't even have LASIK surgery because that would even worsen it, I think, or something like that. So I don't really know. I just know that I'm very blind as well. So the eye is a complicated thing.
I feel like that happens a lot with guys who have been shooting poorly. They just always go to the eye doctor, and all of a sudden they find the slightest thing wrong with them, and all of a sudden they have the proper contacts to wear then.
I'm just wondering, what does the basket look like to you when you don't have, can you not tell? I feel like that's one of those things, I'm very blind and I can't, if I take my glasses off, I can't, read, the closest sign next to me.
Imagine how accurate he is, that he's been shooting this way without.
It's he just sees the net and he's like, oh, just chuck it up
vision.
There.
Well, is he nearsighted or is he farsighted? That's my biggest question.
Yeah, well, the stigmatism, I think is, I don't want to get this wrong, but I think it's nearsighted, but I could be wrong.
That sounds about right. That's what I have.
I'm farsighted.
I'm perfect, so.
Today.
What was that laugh about? We're going to have a conversation after this.
Let's do this, guys. All right. On today's show, we're going to talk about some teams that are peaking and slumping before the playoffs. Playoffs start next week. This is our last group chat before the playoffs, guys.
Wow. It's about
What
time.
are our standings? Where are we?
I think we're on the 8th seed bubble.
Yeah, take the bubble.
That
I'll
sounds
take the
about
bubble.
right.
We're the Heat. We're just dying to get in. We lost Josh Richardson. I guess that's Chris.
Yeah.
We'll also talk about some other stuff. But first, I want to talk about the real winners of this week, the Washington Wizards, firing Ernie Grunfeld after 16 years at the helm. 16 years. I'm trying to think of the last thing I did for 16 years. I don't think it's anything. Maybe put contacts in? Yeah, besides lived, yeah. Well, you could argue. One could argue. But we're gonna talk about some other bad teams in relation to the Wizards. We're gonna call them our futureless rankings. Basically, a ranking of all the bad situations in the league, which ones are the worst. But starting with the Wizards, who I would say have the bleakest outlook in the NBA right now. Simply because while they got rid of Grunfeld and they brought in Tommy Shepard, a guy who, as far as I know, is respected around the league, even though he spent a lot of his prime years underneath Ernie Grunfeld. He's just one of these guys that's known for being a little bit ahead of the curve. He's got his work cut out for him if he does indeed stay, currently the interim role. Just based on the salary they have in the books, John Wall's contract is probably one of the worst contracts of the past couple of years. Really getting Gilbert Arenas vibes, which makes it appropriate that this is happening in Washington again. Does this seem like, Haley, the worst situation in the league to you?
So, are we talking about teams that I would least want to take over?
Sure, we can go with that.
Okay.
You're taking interviews for GM jobs right now, so
okay. I mean, I didn't want to say it. I was going to break it to you guys privately. The Wizards are tough, but it's almost hard for me to say that they are the worst outcome right now or have the least appealing future, because part of what made them so unappealing to me before was Grunfeld. And it seemed like he was never going to be let go. And so that was a major part of it. And, we thought because of him, they would never be able to break up the big three, which they actually did. He traded Otto Porter before he was fired. But I think that played a large part in it.
Big three there is a little generous.
They called them the big three. I mean, that's big three can be so many things.
Right.
We could be a big three, one might say.
Great point.
Yeah, it's extremely flexible these days. But
I mean, yes.
They are capped out, but one of those players is Bradley Beal. Who knows? Like, maybe the new guy will come in and tell Ted, like, you have to let me hinky this. They will completely blow it up. There are just possibilities now because we don't know who's going to take over. Now, a lot of people think that a lot of what Ernie did was really what Ted wanted. So maybe it'll just be more of the same with the next person. But no, I would not call them the bleakest. I would have before, but not anymore because things could change.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that in that they're not the bleakest, but my reasoning would just be like Bradley Beal. He's really good.
He's the ultimate guy.
Yeah, there you go. No, I just think he's really good, and they have talent, and
sure,
just by him alone, right? And that gives you some sort of hope to be, I don't know what, right? But like Haley was saying, maybe the GM that comes in is the guy who comes and blows everything up. Now, it doesn't seem like that's the direction that they want to go in.
No, because a part of the reason why he said he decided to finally fire Ernie was that they didn't have the 50-win season, which was their goal, and did go further in the playoffs.
So I don't know. Does that mean they're going
to... the owner.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
So I don't know if they're going to try to do a version of like the Clippers rebuild where they didn't really rebuild. They just kind of restocked and re-upped or whatever. I don't know if that's going to work. That's obviously a very unique circumstance. But
you really don't see that a lot.
You really don't. And so, I mean, I think they probably should go the blow it up route, but
if they did go the Clippers route, then it would mean finding a home for John Wall, which would not nearly be as hard as obviously Chris Paul forced a trade. It's not as hard as it was to trade Blake Griffin, and then also DeAndre Jordan was up by himself.
Yeah.
Now, because they also don't have a number of their future picks, I think they've given away every pick until 2024. It's a second round pick. First round picks, we'll check and I'll get back to you. But because of that, if they do decide, I think it's smart to honestly let Beal go.
See, that's where
it's hard to say that also because Washington is not somewhere that free agents go.
Yeah, it's tough because you look at the Clippers situation and they've been able to kind of rebuild on the fly there. I think we've gotten to this habit of just assuming that the next star player is just going to want out of it. But I think there is something to be said about just trying to make it work while they're there. I think Bradley Beal is a guy who could feasibly still make an All-NBA team. I don't know if they'll have the wins and he'll have the support for it. But I would try to do what I can to make it work. To Haley's point, Blake Griffin, even though he is often injured, is an All-NBA guy in himself, when he is playing. I don't know if John Wall's ever going to get back to that.
Right, that's the issue. And
so that's why, to me, it's like they just have this millstone of a contract. It's one of the biggest contracts in the league that didn't even start. His extension part of it didn't kick in yet. That comes this summer. And then you have most likely 4 more years. Last year's a player option, but who's turning down $46.872 million in 2022 and 2023. One team that, the only team I can think of that's even close to that would be the Lakers. And again, a Gilbert Arenas sort of move where the Magic seemed like they were on their last leg. They needed to make things work. They swung the deal for Arenas, just hoping that getting the talent in there would kind of elongate their window with Dwight Howard toward the end there. It seems extreme, though. It's just completely improbable, especially considering, worst case Lakers probably can sign a Chris Middleton or someone like that.
I can't see any team trading for John Wall and not asking for other assets.
Yeah.
Which is a problem because A, the Wizards don't have them, and B, that's not how a future GM or president is going to want to start his tenure.
Yeah, I'll say this about the Wizards. I don't think they've drafted particularly poorly. I don't have much of an opinion on Troy Brown. He's a young guy. He's still 19, and maybe he turns into something. He's the type of wing guy you want. But when they were at the top of the draft, they didn't flub it. They weren't like the Hornets with Michael Kidd-Gilchrist at number 2. Bradley Beal is an All-NBA player. John Wall, when he's healthy, an All-NBA player.
Yeah.
Otto Porter, they overpaid to keep him. Probably not the best move, but still a very good player who I think has kind of made sense of the Chicago Bulls' roster a little bit. Satoransky also helpful. I don't know. It's just...
I think the worst of their worst was really bad, Vesely. And then also, it's just that they haven't kept and developed those picks either. Like the products of who they've drafted it looks so much worse because think about the guys that they've kept, who they've drafted. I saw a tweet that was like, since 2009, it's Satoransky and Brown because Kelly Oubre was traded.
Yeah,
right.
And
that's the issue with it. That makes it look way worse.
The trades for
But to be
Oubre
clear, they've had really bad draft picks.
Yeah, with the trades for Oubre.
In the past, I think recently they've drafted pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think
Depending
for
on what Troy
safety's
Brown
sake,
is.
like, so someone doesn't come here and like protest outside, we should just say that like the Wizards have drafted poorly in the past.
In the distant past, I would say. I think Vesely is a mistake. I think some of the other ones are mistakes, but I would say that their drafting has been fine. I think it's what they've done around their draft picks that...
And the development is really bad.
Yeah, they just like... It's just what have they done in addition to just drafting players and signing them to the max available contracts?
The pressure
it's
is also...
like there's no direction. Like the reason they traded... They let Oubre go and via trade is because... And they got Trevor Ariza back? Like what was that? Like
For
it's an
1 year.
expiring contract, right? And then Otto Porter, you get Bobby Portis and Jabari Parker back. But it's like, what's the end game there? You know what I'm saying?
There wasn't much of a plan. And
I think that with the Porter contract, actually, I'm supportive of that trade because it was a mistake when they offered it to him. And for a team that's already so tight in what they can do, it was just too much money to pay him. He wasn't like materializing into a guy who was worth that contract. In my opinion, Bobby Portis is someone who's far cheaper and I don't want to say the words more useful, but more useful compared to what you have to pay him. And it gives you the flexibility. Like I always go back to the Wolves. They're so lucky that Jimmy Butler wanted to trade because if they would have felt like they were forced into re-signing him, it would have given them no flexibility. All of a sudden, they have a lot of flexibility and they have players like Bobby Portis who are, like Robert Covington. It gives them more flexibility to choose a different future going forward.
Yeah, I just think that they had something going there. There's a team that we expected to be on the rise with that core of Beal and Wall. Just a few years ago, we thought that that's the team of the future. It's just everything that they've done since then has been pretty questionable to me. And including, it's just they got all this cap space, assuming that they could sign somebody, and when they didn't, they kind of panicked and just signed everybody off the street that they could. Andrew Nicholson, some of these other guys. Yeah, Mahinmi.
Yeah, the KD sort of...
Thinking KD was going to come and then panicking
mistake.
afterwards is like, you can point to every team that's in cap trouble. It's because they've panicked afterwards.
I guess that would be the reason for optimism is that they do have Beal. We'll see what happens with Wall. If someone can have more of a clear directive, if Ted Leonsis, the owner, can put someone in place there who has more of a vision or who can walk the line between being competitive and not bottoming out totally, there's something there. Is what I would say. And so perhaps that's the counter argument to saying that they're the bleakest place in the league.
I think something else that should be mentioned is that this kind of goes along with development, but the culture is just really bad. And, I don't know how much that has to do with if that will end until, Wall isn't there anymore. I think that some things might be a little bit beyond repair. And when you're thinking like a major overhaul, maybe it's time to overhaul more pieces than just the GM.
Right. And
the president.
And that's the big part of a lead decision maker's role is to establish that culture, get the right coaches in place to carry it out. You hear that a lot. I mean, Paolo just spent some time with the Atlanta Hawks. Mm-hmm. You could just tell from some of the details you were describing in your story earlier this week up on the website, just how there's something changing there. There just seems like everyone's on the same page. It seems like there's like this infectious joy that spreads throughout them. And that's something that, that can't really be, that's priceless.
Yeah. I guess you sort of need somebody to, not just to manage, but to establish, if that makes sense. Like, because everything sort of flows from that. And obviously the Hawks hiring Travis Schlenk from the Warriors and then him bringing in Lloyd Pierce, it was like they were all sequential decisions that had a through line, right? And that's, I think, what's most important, where you can see that through line eventually like blossoming into a, maybe not a successful team, but but a team that has a plan and that could have a chance at success because of the way they're building the foundation.
I think the Nets are really comparable in that way. Like I would texted Paolo the other day when it seemed like the entire Nets team went to their G League semifinals, and now their team's going to the finals. And Theo Pinson hit a last-second buzzer beater, and like D'Angelo Russell and everyone exploded off the bench, and something like that didn't necessarily that doesn't exist on the that doesn't exist on the Wizards.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't really exist on the Warriors right now either.
Well, yeah, it's just a different type of team where like sort of all the young guys, you have some guys go up to the NBA team and back to the G League team. Like the Clippers have a little bit of that too with like Sindarius Thornwell and a couple of the other guys like Jerome Robinson where they're on both teams. And you see sort of the connective tissue across the multiple teams.
Whereas when I was in the Wizards locker room earlier this season for the Thomas Sadaransky story I did, it was the most bizarre and quiet locker room I've ever been in. No one was playing music. No one was talking. Like 2 people were showing each other memes on their phone.
Wow. Memes brings people together.
Memes do bring people together.
That's true. I just looked up their Wizards draft picks. Since John Wall, their first round picks, Jan Vesely at 6, terrible. Bradley Beal at 3, Otto Porter at 3. And then I forgot they traded all these first round picks.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to walk this back a little bit. But they got Kelly Oubre 1 year. I believe that was in 2015 when they technically drafted Jaren Grant.
I think a lot of
and
people
Troy Brown would be this year.
Also thinking that their drafting has been so bad is because they've traded, which I guess their picks, which you can technically count as part of drafting, but also because of all the players now who are veterans that they passed up on. So they're seeing that like Steph Curry could have been with the Wizards. Klay Thompson could have been with the Wizards. There are a number of guys that they passed on who are still active, dominant players. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what hurts because it's lingering.
Yeah. So if not the Wizards, who would you guys say is the bleakest outlook?
Honestly, like
the darkest timeline.
The Suns are very much like a young team and one that have potential to change course. It's not like they're super capped out or anything, but the culture, again, seems so bad there. And it seems like it starts from the top. We hear reports about the owner, Robert Sarver, all the time, having a heavy hand in the decision-making and not being very good with that decision-making. And it just feels like that culture won't change unless he goes.
I think for me, for just choosing teams that I think that, are futureless, if you will, the Hornets.
Yeah.
The Hornets take the cake for me. For so many different reasons. Like, I just think that I don't know what they're doing, and even if they,
it's usually a bad sign.
Yeah, bad sign. But maybe even if they do decide to throw, the entire bring struck toward Kemba, which like sure you want to keep your guy, it really underlines for me how much worse it is to if you don't have a superstar, how much worse it is to try and just treat your star as a superstar.
Well,
you know
and
what
then
I'm saying?
Think about this. All these years on Kemba's contract, one of the cheapest for someone of his talent.
Right.
Through the last 4 years, they failed to surround him with any talent.
Right.
So now you're going to supermax him, or they can just max him?
Well, if he makes All-NBA,
okay,
he can be
whatever. You're going to give him as much money as you possibly can.
Right.
Which honestly, I don't disagree with because I don't see any other future for them. And you're still going to have you're going to have an even harder time surrounding him with talent.
Well, that's the thing that I'm trying to get at is if you do that, you handcuff yourself even more. So what's the alternative? Is it to try and do some sort of like Sixers process thing, right? It's like, well, how do you have so much money on the books? There's like every avenue is a dead end unless you blow it up.
That's the thing is that Kemba is someone that they got through the draft. And I think that their thinking is that that's the only way that they're going to get people.
Yeah, so right now, before they make a decision on Kemba this summer, he's an unrestricted free agent for the first time. They have $102 million on the books already. That's before Kemba even comes into play here.
It's ridiculous.
Nick Batum, Bismack Biyombo's player option, Cody Zeller, Marvin Williams' his player option, and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, his player option. That's $85.1 million.
This is someone who multiple times, this is a team who multiple times on this podcast, we've wondered who their second best player is. Not because it's like a stiff competition, but like by default.
I have to say, when the first day possible that guys could pick up their player options this season, there's going to be like a party at like the Bojangles in Charlotte.
Sure.
With some of these guys. Because there are 3 player options that like I can't imagine they waste even a second. Like Bismack Biyombo's, who I believe is coming in around like $15 million for doing nothing. I will say this. Recently, you've started to see signs of the coaching staff starting to deploy their guys in a little bit more of an interesting way. I think we talked about this briefly last week, and Kevin O'Connor wrote about it for The Ringer, I think 2 weeks ago, just kind of what they've been doing and the obstacles facing Kemba Walker. But they're kind of leaning into some of these younger guys. You're seeing more Miles Bridges. You're seeing Dwayne Bacon a little bit more, who's kind of like budget what Malik Monk was supposed to be.
Right.
And so there's this like chalk outline of a versatile, switchy team with like a rim protector and Bismack at the rim. Still, it does feel like they're trying. Like they're trying. That's the thing. Is like to do something.
If you're gonna pick something to put your hope in, if you want to call it that, it is sort of the coaching staff and that new, Jim Sprague coming in and sort of trying to establish a different kind of culture, if you will, and playing those young guys more. But again, it goes a like that crashes against everything that is on your pay sheet, if you will, So it's like, how do you do that, and how do you consider the future of the team while also considering how Kemba fits into that? And I think that's obviously the biggest question for them this offseason, but it doesn't sound like they're not going to offer him all the money. It's just about whether he turns it down or not.
They have a number of second-round draft picks going out as late as 2021, but they also should have 4 coming in. There is like stipulations on both sides, but it could be worse.
Yeah, and they haven't drafted particularly well over the course of the past few years. Monk, I don't have much faith in him. I don't know if you guys still do, but Kaminsky, another guy who's kind of dying on the vine there.
Malik Monk is going to come around. He's young.
Mitch didn't draft them.
Yeah, he had his
Put your
own
faith in
Mitch in the Lakers situation. So I have the Charlotte at 2 actually as my bleakest outlooks. I had the Suns 7 just because it feels like I agree with Haley. But just a tanking team just has all this wealth of talent. And so you just hope if they get the right coach that they can do something. But I totally agree that everything comes from the top down. And
it is hard to attach that to a team that's not like monetarily stuck.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes the Wizards, even though they have the most talent out of the 3 teams we listed at the top, the most bleak situation.
And you could look at the Tyler Johnson trade they swung at the deadline as kind of like maybe understanding their situation a little bit, just that they have cap space, but like were they really going to sign anybody? Right. And do you really want it to disrupt like the good that you've kind of fostered with Devin Booker, who's going off for 50 and 60 pretty much every night, and then the team is still losing.
But
he did get
looks
hurt
to
last
be
night.
fine.
At the end of the season, what do we think about the signings that they had at the beginning? So obviously they traded Trevor Ariza. But like they brought him in, they brought in Ryan Anderson. Am I missing someone?
That was pretty much the gist of it. I mean,
Tyson Chandler.
At the time, it was like, okay, they're trying to add veterans who might help the growth process.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them came from a winning team, but I mean, it didn't really work.
Yeah, I think that signing, in addition to firing Ryan McDonough as GM, just kind of underscored like how their perception of what their team was just wasn't reality. And we were saying this in the preseason too. Like at best, let's say all of their draft picks play well, they're still a super young team, and young teams make mistakes. There's like in the West, where like a team like the Kings can't even break in. It was impossible. They weren't going to make the playoffs regardless. And it was just, and that's where the ownership and kind of what the directive is coming into play with some of these teams, where even if you're doing everything right, even if Ayton becomes the next Shaq, if you're not like, if things aren't in order, if you're not deploying them properly, if you're not giving them the appropriate time, like that screws everything up. It undercuts everything you're going to do.
Well, and it's also the system. Like you think about the Hawks, like we're so into their system, and that's I think why we're, assuming that they're going to have like a bright future, maybe more so than, definitely more so than Phoenix. I think we're already seeing the guys used in ways that we like, whereas with Phoenix, it's like not necessarily true.
Yeah. So I had Phoenix at 7 on my personal rankings. Number 3 on mine is the Detroit Pistons It's a bit of a curveball because
I literally forgot they existed, or they probably would have been 2 for me.
Tough look for Detroit, man.
that's perfect then, because it does feel like even though they are probably going to make the playoffs, and Josh Richardson, news came down that he might miss 2 weeks with an injured groin, so it seems like the Heat are functionally out of that race unless they can rally here. But the Pistons are 39-39 this season, and that's nice, but that's probably the best they're going to get with this current core. Blake has played like an All-NBA player, as we mentioned, but like he's already 30.
It's truly such a waste of a healthy Blake season, which is so sad.
Well, they're gonna make the playoffs. I mean, that's their ceiling to me. So it's not really. I don't know if it's a waste. It's just like this is just who they are.
I think it is a waste because Blake could be on a team that, I mean, could possibly get to a finals if he's surrounded by the right person.
Yeah,
I think we've seen that story before, though. The Clippers. Like,
yeah,
he would be good.
There are many variables that go into that. Like how many years were one of them injured? That's the thing about the Clippers is
I think
it was never choking as much as it was like bad situations for me.
I think he'd be interesting on a team that already has something in place, and if he was like the fourth guy. If you're a team like the Rockets a few years from now, and let's just say that you have the contracts in order to swing a deal for him, and the Pistons just want to dump his contract, I feel like he would be the type of guy, like you put him in a winning situation. Well, they wouldn't trade for him because they have Chris Paul, but a team like them, the Heat, for instance, let's say the Heat,
that's interesting,
just want to get a star in air quotes into their system. Mm-hmm. I think he's the guy who could maybe take a second step under Eric Spoelstra and that whatever they're doing in the gym there, where everybody gets abs all of a sudden.
So, just poof, magic
seems
abs.
Nice. Yeah, just use the medicine ball, or what do you use for
Run
abs?
on the beach.
What do you use for abs?
Crunches.
Yep.
Do people still do crunches?
Planks.
Planks?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do some planks later.
Leg lifts.
But
Summer's coming.
Even next season, it's already looking bad because between Reggie Jackson, John Lure, who's playing 10 minutes a game, and Langston Galloway, they have $35 million on their books. The one thing is like Drummond's player option becomes a bit of a question because he's the type of guy who could probably get money elsewhere. I don't know.
How much is his player option worth?
It's worth $28.8 million, which is a lot.
No, he is definitely opting into that.
It's tough. He's 25 right now. He's going to be 27.
It is crazy that he is 25 right now.
Yeah. I guess the age you can make a case that he could get more than that.
Yeah, but if he stays the same center, it's interesting because this year they kept saying that he's going to, Dwayne Casey was like, no, he's going to become more versatile. His skill set will become more versatile on offense. But if he stays the same center, think of 2 more years of, progressing this modern offense of taller guys coming into the league and being able to offer more.
He needs to stop shooting threes.
He's taking
until the playoffs, and then he should pull it out.
He's taken 38 total this year. He has made 5 of them. So, kudos for trying. We all need self-improvement in our lives.
That's what the summertime
vulnerability.
is for.
He's showing vulnerability.
Wow. Summer is for shooting and abs, yes. Paolo, who do you have on your personal ranking?
Well, number 1 was the Hornets, but I think the Pelicans are in a weird spot too.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Some weird stuff happening. Because they don't have, you have the Grizzlies on this list, which I'm sure we'll get through or whatnot, but they have a young player in Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't know who the Pelicans have as much as I like Frank Jackson. They don't have that type of guy to sort of at least hold on to. Now, that might change with the Anthony Davis trade, but it really depends on what they're looking for to get in that trade. Are they looking for a picks package? Are they looking for a player package? Who are they going to hire as a GM? Mark Stein reported today that apparently David Griffin interviewed. So that's interesting. But again, it goes back to sort of the theme we were talking about. It's just you need some sort of idea, some sort of foundation, some guy to come in and be like, hey, this is what we want for Anthony Davis. This is what we're gonna go get.
Yeah, because they have Drew, which is at least some. It's some stability.
Yeah, no, for sure.
They need to kill that trade, though. They need to really, really be smart in that trade, or else they're gonna
think they can't. That's the question.
It depends on the GM, I guess.
Yeah, and we spent a whole podcast talking about some of the difficulties they might have trading with the Lakers again, and then kind of the cascading effects of that. Plus, if Kyrie leaves Boston, what are they getting in there? I assume they'll have some sort of promising young player or draft pick to come away with it. But it gets really interesting there. Drew's the type of guy who's young enough, who's good enough, where you could do a Clippers style reboot with him playing some sort of role. But I do wonder if he's the type of guy who wants to waste his prime, essentially not competing for the playoffs. He's a guy who's had lots of injury issues over the course of his career. I don't know if he's going to want to waste like some of his best basketball just like trying to make it work with Frank Jackson.
Yeah.
I'm not
He loves
sure.
Frank, but yes.
I'm not sure that I don't know this for sure. I can't think like of a certain quote, but Drew strikes me as the guy who's like the Bradley Beal type who's like, no, I won't give up on it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I think he just wants
especially
to play
after the
basketball.
Anthony
Like,
Davis thing.
I think he would probably enjoy playing in LA because that's where he lives. But aside from that, I don't think it matters to him really.
Yeah.
I'm sure he wants to win as much as the next guy, but
He's a tough guy to figure out. I think if the situation was going well, he'd want to stay. He did say amidst all the Anthony Davis like kerfuffling, is that a word? Kerfuffle.
Sure. Kerfuffle, you're just making
I'm
do it.
Do
your thing.
That's good.
I'm innovative,
Yeah.
That one of the big reasons. Yeah, that's me. One of the big reasons he stayed was 2 years ago when he re-signed with the Pelicans was just in order to kind of play with Anthony Davis.
And he did say that for sure.
He did. He also, I think, because I was still on the beat at that time, I think he was all but gone at the end of that season. I think the Mavericks were in pursuit. I think the Sixers were also rumored to have interest, but that's why the Pelicans paid him as much as they did. It's worked out for both sides, but that's kind of where they can go one way or another. If not, they go full reboot. And I think it's probably better for them overall, but then you open up a world of questions. Like, are we going to hit our draft picks? Do we have the system in place? Do we have the scouting system in place in order to kind of like get these guys in? And are we making the right gambles on certain guys like Kenny Hustle in there,
Yeah.
That's our guy. So I don't know. It's kind of a big question mark. I had them at 4, actually, right underneath the Pistons.
I actually think that before, again, like same kind of with Washington, before the Davis, request for a trade, I would have had them higher. But now that they have flexibility again, I think that's like way more appealing to me than a team that's stuck with a talent like that. Because you're not going anywhere. It's been proven for years you're not going anywhere. But the option that you could get a mix of young guys with a ton of potential and picks, okay, like if they don't pan out, you don't have to pay them. You can start over. You can keep starting over until you get a solution. And in today's NBA, it's so much more acceptable to tank and at least look like you're working towards something than it is to be on the treadmill of mediocrity.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I think the summer is so big because they have to nail the GM hire and the trade. And it has to be, if they want to go back to the playoffs even. Like that's the bar if they want to get back into the Western Conference playoff picture, which is hard enough in itself. At some point in the next 5 years, maybe, like they have to get those right.
In the next 5 years, like that's realistic. But if they are setting I'm not even sure that the Clippers had that expectation going into the season or even halfway through when they traded Tobias. I'm not sure, but it's very fortunate it's worked out that way for them. I'm not sure the Pelicans could pull that off, but I don't think their fans should be upset if they don't make the playoffs for 3 years, but all of a sudden are building toward something and going in a new direction because this direction just didn't work.
Yeah. I think much like Washington, there's a situation where you get the right guy in place there. You kind of have free reign to do something pretty significant. The way I had been, the Pelicans organization had been described to me pretty recently was just that they are so hands off. And while that works to their detriment in certain ways, if you have someone like a David Griffin or one of these other people with track record and a vision, and you just kind of let them go, it's ultimately probably for the best of the organization. It's just kind of, there's not a lot of oversight, I guess, and people kind of meddling in the situation with the Suns. So that would be to the benefit of someone potentially coming in there. Haley, who else do you have on your list?
I just want to briefly circle back to the Wizards because something just came to me like a cloud from heaven, like a really, what I think is an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who says no? John Wall for Andrew Wiggins.
That's an interesting one.
You fix Andrew Wiggins is the worst player, but you kind of start to fix the locker room a little bit. Maybe you like get in a new coach who you think could develop better. Now, with that being said, Ryan Saunders has, it seems like, inspired Wiggins. He's had quite a positive stretch as of late, but the Wolves need a point guard.
That's true. They need a point guard. I don't know if they need that point guard. Especially,
I'd rather have him than Teague.
Yeah, Teague's on the books next year for a player option at 19.
Oh, I would rather have Team than Teague too. I'm just saying, I don't know what that does to their path now.
I don't hate it.
Yeah, it's not terrible. It's an interesting idea.
Wall's not going to play for a year. I'm like pouring over their books right
Which
now.
is good because then they could like tank again.
To the Wizards?
Wolves.
Oh.
So your team would functionally be Wall when he's healthy, Covington, Dario, Towns.
I guess why would that sounds great, but I would say the Wizards say no.
I would say the Wolves say no just because I guess
they're getting rid of that contract. See, but getting rid of that contract and then taking on Andrew Wiggins' contract is not that great.
That's true. They would have to take on another problematic contract. I think that where I'm going with this is that I really believe that Wall is a problem with the other players.
Yeah, that's right. After Jimmy Butler, you'd be sticking Towns with Wall.
Well,
he's going to have major PTSD.
But yeah, well, I think that they are kind of different players, and I think that Wall just appreciates a team that appreciates him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ever since Beal got paid more at first, he's been a little resentful since all of that. I think he just needs a new situation. I think the Wizards need a new situation, even if it's a player that's, obviously has never shown the talent that Wall's shown.
Yeah.
I just forgot that we were recording this on a podcast, so Twitter, don't make fun of me for this idea.
Bobby Portis, Andrew Wiggins, Jabari Parker on the same team is like, that's just like, I feel like
they can get rid of Jabari eventually. He's super temporary.
Well, you're right. It was only a 1-year deal, right?
It's a team option for next year, yeah. And as Bobby chimes in here, John Wall and Towns have the Kentucky connection.
There you go.
And
Kentucky connects.
Immediately become Chris Ryan's favorite team right there.
They've always
just go hire John.
Gross. They've always said that Wall really wants to team up with another Kentucky guy. They've like mentioned Anthony Davis, DeMarcus Cousins. I say just put them on all one team. So I never watched that team.
Devin Booker.
Yeah.
It's always weird to me when guys just want to play with guys who went to the same college. Like
for 6 months.
Not even in the same years.
Yeah, it's just like they're not even really friends, but they have mutual friends.
It's a family, Justin.
Their mutual friend is like Coach Cal.
Right.
Yeah.
But you never know. These guys could have recruited, and that could be a special connection. Maybe like John Wall recruited another player who now wants to play with him because they remember that.
Haley, who do you have?
Oh, for what number are we on?
We're jumping around.
Okay, yeah. I think I've changed the order a couple times, but definitely the Pelicans, definitely the Pistons, definitely the Hornets, definitely the Wizards. I would go next with the Cavs.
Okay.
I like Memphis's future more than I did when they had Gasol, and it seemed like they had to go for it because they have him and Conley. I just like when teams open things back up when it's clear that it's not working. That's been the philosophy for the last few years, and a lot of the teams that have abided by it are now successful, or at least we're starting to see a path where they could become successful. It works. Now, lottery reform might change that quite a bit, which is important because Memphis kind of has to trade for somebody or draft them. It's another place that's not going to get free agents. But I think the Cavs are worse off than them.
Yeah, I think Memphis, the big thing working against them is obviously the draft pick they owe to Boston. It's top 8 protected this year and top 6 protected next year. So they've kind of backed themselves into a situation where they're going to be bad for the foreseeable future. Getting rid of Gasol kind of just solidified that, and then potentially losing Conley will only make it worse. So they're going to give up a very good pick. It's just a matter of when. The uncertainty is a little concerning to me, and just the fact that while they have Jaren Jackson, not almost losing a year of reaping the benefits of being bad, it might be crippling. We're not talking about just like an instant reboot. It's potentially a couple years down the line now.
Yeah, this feels like, and while I think your point is right about teams being aware enough to be like, all right, it's not working, let's change it. You could argue the Grizzlies should have done this a few years ago.
Totally. I completely agree.
I think that's what may be coming back to bite them a little bit. And now that they have to take a sort of a longer reboot now that they have that talent like Jaren Jackson Jr. and sort of hope that they can draft another guy.
You kind of get into a Suns situation where like they have Devin Booker.
Yeah,
He's a
exactly.
great talent.
But what are you going to do with him? And is it going to take too long to establish? I do think the Grizzlies culture might be better, and just a little bit better than Phoenix's. But I think in general, it is a little bit tough to see how they build this. Because the other top picks in Jaren's draft have more of a I don't know, a positive outlook. Like you got the Mavs who brought in KP and the Hawks, like we talked about, and even the Kings, right? They're probably going to be expected to make the playoffs next year. So I don't know. It's just a tough situation, and it's a bummer that they can't sort of maximize. It's probably going to come back to bite them in the sense that Jaren Jackson is going to eventually need to get paid once the team is actually maybe getting good, and that's another issue to sort of keep an eye on.
Right.
Yeah.
The timing is bad.
Yeah.
Right now, Memphis is 6th in the draft tanking race, which means they would keep their pick for this year. It doesn't seem like they're going to get any better, too, because Jonas Valanciunas was just lost for the season. And I went to their game on Sunday, and they were playing guys I've literally never heard of before. Some guy named Dusty Hannas. Like, I follow the league really closely.
I'm going to pay for his personal trainer this summer
Nights or something?
because I need that
Dusty
name
Hannas?
to be in the NBA next year.
Julian Washburn also got minutes. Like, I looked out on the court and
It
I'm
sounds
just
like a
who
Key and
are-
Peele skit.
Yeah.
Right.
Dusty Hannas is, wow, that's special.
I
Yeah.
love that.
But yeah, to Paul's point earlier, I mean, the Kyle Anderson contract just seems really weird now because they're paying him for 3 more years after this one. And that's the type of like mid-level contract that you don't just want to give out.
Also trading for Justin Holiday.
Not great.
He's
So clearly
29.
this wasn't the plan.
Yeah.
They were trying to go for it and things went away.
Something that Pat Riley said when fans were getting really frustrated this last summer that they didn't make any moves was that he wasn't going to just make trades to make trades. It was surprising because he's always someone who's pulled off these flashy trades. But you look at their team now, and I think they are in a better situation than they were in the summer, even with the same guys, because we've seen significant growth in some of them. And now maybe they're better set up to make a trade. They didn't rush into Jimmy Butler. I'm not really sure that he's the best they could get. And then they'd have to re-sign him, and they'd be in a lot of, I don't even know if they'd have the money to re-sign him. They would have they would have gotten off, I don't know, maybe Hassan Whiteside contract. I don't know how they would have done it, but they would have had to give something up. So I think that's the argument for not signing guys just to sign guys, even though he said trade. I think patience and being really bad for a couple years is better.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I think that's a good pivot to one of the next teams I have on this list, the New York Knicks. Clearly cleaned the books this year. I think we all assume that they're going to get somebody at this point, but it's pretty much
hilarious if they did it at this point.
Yeah, well, there's that possibility.
It's happened before, though.
Sure.
It's happened before, and then Howard Beck wrote a story in Bleacher Report this week just how he talked to a few front office people and kind of ranking the big market front offices of the Nets, Knicks, Lakers, and Clippers, because it's the first time really since the max contract came into play that all 4 are going to be free agent players. And the vibe basically was that the Knicks still have some toxicity looming over them. A lot of it because of James Dolan. Now, it could be the sort of thing where people in the league recognize that, and it's completely different than a Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving who can recognize that, but they also see the opportunity to play together in the biggest market in the league and
under a good coach, and also doesn't Kevin Durant have a good relationship with someone in the front office?
I believe he has,
or at least through Rich.
He's connected to one of the assistant coaches too, I think.
Yeah.
I think if we
Justin, read up. Read more.
I think he knows
Watch
Steve
a
Mills, but
basketball
I'm
game
not
or two. Yeah, it's Steve Mills. It's Steve Mills. Through Rich.
I think that's a great point that maybe the league looks at it that way, but maybe the players don't. Because if we're thinking about these guys as guys who want to be agents of their own future and think that they have this, and really do have this power as players, they're probably thinking like, we're going to go in there and transcend whatever the issues are, because that's just the type of the level of players we are,
LeBron's a perfect example.
I wouldn't be surprised if they have that self-confidence to be like, we don't really care about. I mean, yeah, it might be problematic down the line if Dolan's still running Knicks, and that's an issue that comes up with like the players and whatnot. But I think if he wants to go there, if other players want to go there, I don't know if they're necessarily, they should look at the ownership, but I don't know how many are actually looking at the entirety of what the organization is as opposed to what they can make the organization.
LeBron is the perfect example. He knew who was going to be in the front office before he signed. And he had to have known that they didn't have very much experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have the Lakers 9th on my list and the Timberwolves 10th.
I would say for the Knicks, it's interesting how many variables matter here. Obviously, getting KD and or Kyrie matters a lot. I think also it matters how the Warriors do in the playoffs. I think that if they lose in the finals, I don't think Kevin Durant is going. I don't think he's leaving. I think that the note that he left on last time when he left OKC really hurt him. I mean, obviously, like he had burner's account. I don't think that can be, I seriously think that might affect it. Kyrie, you never know what's going on in his head. I also think that Dolan selling the team or not selling the team, maybe out of resentment, also factors into this. Because maybe they do think about that. Or maybe other players do think about that. So I think it's interesting because there's a lot of factors going into it.
I mean, we have the Clippers who are a great example of showing how good ownership can make a difference. So it's not like I would imagine it's something people think about. I just think that if Kevin Durant wants to go to New York, he's going to go to New York. Like, I don't know if that's going to deter him.
Yeah.
I seriously do.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I think he cares a lot about his image. And leaving on a good note, I think he really was damaged after leaving OKC.
So you think that if they win, he's
gone?
He's gone. But if they lose, he stays.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I think he might be gone either way. I think the losing would also be like, all right, well, this is it. Like, can't win anymore. So like, let's go. Or, or the winning, it's like, well, we won everything. So let's go. I don't know. You could frame it either way.
All right. That's it. We'll wrap that up for talking about some of these bad teams here, but there are still some good teams playing with about a week to go for the regular season. The Bucks are playing the Philadelphia 76ers at 5 p.m. Pacific tonight on TNT. We're going to call that our watch of the night here. We do this once a week. It's pretty much the best game on the schedule. Some other bad ones out there, so this is definitely the one you want to focus on tonight. It just still seems like the Sixers have a little bit of proof here, especially against some of the teams that they're going to go up against in order to potentially make the finals. The Bucks are just like losing players left and right, but are still kind of motoring through the end of the season here. They probably won't get to 60 wins, although they're 2 out. So that one would be interesting just because from the narrative perspective, Mike Budenholzer obviously had 60 with the Atlanta Hawks in 2014-15. So it's always interesting to compare those two separate teams. So that's at 5 p.m. Pacific tonight on TNT. Remember, if you want to watch every NBA game, subscribe to NBA League Pass on NBA.com or your local cable or satellite provider. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to talk about some good teams who are either peaking or slumping. Today's episode of the Ringer NBA Show is brought to you by Hotel Tonight. This summer is a great time to check out Hotel Tonight. Whether you want a spontaneous getaway or to escape to a warm beach, Hotel Tonight makes it easy to book a room with one of their last-minute deals. There are tons of empty hotel rooms out there just waiting to be booked. That's how Hotel Tonight scores such incredible rates. They team up with awesome hotels to help them sell those rooms and pass the savings along to you. And these aren't last resort type places. Hotel Tonight works with cool, top-rated hotels you actually want to stay at. Unlike other travel companies, you don't have to scroll through endless lists of hotels. Hotel Tonight shows you the best deals at great hotels along with short profiles that have pictures and all the info you need. Even though their name is Hotel Tonight, they're not just for last-minute bookings. You can play things by ear or use Hotel Tonight to book in advance. And when you join Hotel Tonight's HT Perks program, the more you book, the better the deals get. To start scoring amazing deals at incredible hotels, go to hoteltonight.com or download the app now. All right, we're back. We're going to talk about some good teams, at least in theory. The big game last night from Wednesday, I thought was just that Rockets-Clippers game, and it ended up being a blowout right from the start there. But the Rockets over the past couple of games have really acquitted themselves. I mean, it's so weird to think back and to look at some of like the stat sheets and you see guys like Carmelo Anthony and James Ennis and the fact that they weren't going to make the playoffs and were really teetering on the brink.
Chris.
Yeah, some of these guys that are in there. They're essentially a new team here. But they blew out the Clippers last night. They blew out Denver a couple of games ago. And pretty much that's their path through the playoffs now. It seems like they're going to get locked into that 3 seed. Clippers with the 6, Denver with the 2. So it's pretty good sign when the 2 teams you're going to face most likely in order to get back to the Western Conference Finals are ones you've completely dominated over the last couple of games of the season. I don't know. Do you guys feel the same way about them? Am I wrong to think that they're the most dangerous team in the NBA right now?
No, I agree. I think it's funny that people always, there's been, studies on whether the last 10 games of the regular season affect postseason play as opposed to the first 10 or 15 or in the concept of momentum and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But I do think there's something to be said for a team figuring itself out through the course of the season and being at its best closer to when the games are going to matter. And I think with the Rockets, you see that because of their defense specifically and how good they've been. I think they're the 3rd best defense since the All-Star break. And they just seem to be so locked in on many different levels. They know how to play with Harden. They know how to fit around them. They know how to defer, but they also know how to contribute like Chris Paul did last night. And I don't know, obviously facing the Warriors is another conversation altogether, but as far as like everybody else in the West, there's nobody else. I wanted to trust the Thunder for a while, but they've fallen off. So I think there's nobody else that's more dangerous.
Do you mean more dangerous to the most dangerous to the Warriors or just the most dangerous in general?
I'm not sure. I think definitely to the Warriors. I want to say that they might be more dangerous than the Warriors at this point.
I'm cautious about saying they've figured themselves out than just they're streaky and they're in another uptick. I think that we haven't had this many good defenses on the East and in the West for the top teams in some years, kind of because the Cavs. So it's exciting, and I'm glad that the Rockets have a solid defense, and I think that really matters if they can continue that in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's what's more important because we know what their offense is already. Like we know what Harden does, where Chris Paul fits, what Capella does. It's all there. It's just about if they can take the advantage on the defensive end somehow against the Warriors, which is sounds unlikely, but it's possible. That's maybe the key to making it another 7-game series.
I don't know. I've been watching this team pretty closely over the past couple of days here. I think they might be better than last season, which is crazy to think.
Say, yeah.
Just because they struck that balance between offense and defense so well and really dominated all of last year. They won 65 games. I just feel like we put a lot of stock in Trevor Ariza as being like the key to everything.
Right.
And obviously they took a hit when they lost him, but it was more because of the guys they tried to use in order to fill the void. It was the Mellos, it was the Michael Carter Williamses, it was the Marquise Chris's of the world. But they've slowly and steadily just like worked the fringes better than I think I've seen in a very long time. Yeah. Danuel House, I believe. Yeah,
he looked great last night.
I think he's like a credible 3-and-D wing. I think he's shooting close to 40%. And he's the type of guy that is pretty much enough of what you want from Ariza. It's basically you're trading off the certainty of Ariza, a veteran who's been in those situations, who's been with the Rockets for a very long time, friends with James Harden, to almost these dice roll players like House, like Austin Rivers.
Yeah.
Amon Shumpert, who they got effectively just for getting rid of Brandon Knight's contract and a draft pick. So they have some guys, and I'm really curious to see what they can do in the playoffs.
Well, I think they've also, we've often talked about Harden's defensive reputation, but as he's gotten a little bit better on that end, I think they've sort of gotten emboldened, if you will, by him causing deflections or, getting steals, which he has done a very good job of this season and taking on this sort of, I don't know if I want to call it identity, but of like kind of wreaking havoc a little bit and being that way on the defensive end. Because if you watch them against the Clippers last night, they like suffocated them. Like they were deflecting passes, forcing a lot of turnovers, and that's the way you want a team to look like if you're going to go up against the Warriors, I think.
Harden's been good on defense. Well, I wouldn't say good. I would say
serviceable for sure.
Yes, competent.
So yeah. Well, I mean, even in the beginning, a lot of it was just that he was lazy. on defense. It
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily that it wasn't there. I think that his defensive abilities or lack of defensive abilities, like I wouldn't even have called that true last year. There were many moments last year when people compared like Russ's defense even to Harden's, and pretty often Harden's was better.
His post defense is also really good. I think if you look at the analytics.
Yep. Paolo just cramming those stats.
Yeah.
No, it's funny to think though, like we talk about how so much has changed with that team, but they really just, their best five, or the five they're probably going to use most often in the playoffs, is still the same guys. It's Harden, it's Paul, it's Eric Gordon, it's Clint Capella, it's PJ Tucker.
Yep.
So like, we always talk about consistency being key to certain teams. There is a degree of consistency. They've just been able to fill out the 6 through 8 guys that they're going to need in a playoff series. So I'm really encouraged. I'd be surprised at this point if they didn't make the Western Conference Finals again. And I'm starting to think that like they might even.
My one concern is that
say it.
Harden had a huge year. He had a historic year of scoring, and guys do get worn out.
Yeah.
They're going to need that from him in the playoffs.
Right.
And the first place that his energy will go is defense.
Well, and to that point, also, Chris Paul has returned from another hamstring injury, and he's been very good. He's been pretty good. But can he hold up, right? Like, is he not going to fall into another injury trap in the postseason, which obviously would doom them again? So it's a very fine line.
Yeah. I think Harden's usage this season is second in history only to the Russell Westbrook MVP season. Which is a lot. And it's a lot of isolations. He's like, if you look at the frequency of isolation plays, it's like Harden at like 40%, and the next 2 are Rockets 2, and then everybody else falls
It bangs
out.
up your body too.
Yeah. But I guess the flip side of what you're saying about Chris Paul would just be that they were right there. And if they had Chris Paul, if he does stay healthy,
I think they win that.
They probably win that series. They're up, 3-2 with home court advantage.
Up at halftime
in Game 7. They were up, I think, like 17 in Game 6.
They lost by a statistical anomaly, basically.
Which was the irony. Was
which
quite
is perfect, but
Get some of those LeBron no injury shots.
Right. Okay, let's move on here to our slumping team, which I can't think of a team slumping more than the Oklahoma City Thunder, much to playoff P's chagrin here. In the past 15, they're 6-9. In the past 10, they're 3-7. Recently swept by the Nuggets. Not a good sign going into a playoff series where you're probably playing the Nuggets in round 1. I guess that is kind of that. Playing the Nuggets is the question about the Thunder, right? Where in the regular season, they were beat every time they played them. But is this team going to be any different in a playoff series?
The Thunder just don't have enough offensive depth.
Yeah.
You just don't to be good in a playoff series.
And I think the news came out today that it doesn't look like Andre Roberson was supposed to play some games with the G League team, but he is now not able to because he's not ready. But the G League season ended.
Oh no!
So they don't know what the plan is there. So that's not good. That's more on defense. But I think you're right. Like I don't know where else they were going to get that offense from.
Well, I mean, often it will come from some player.
Yeah, they'll have a good game.
It'll be like 1 in 3
Ferguson.
games. Yeah, Schroeder. It'll be like 1 in 3 games, and that's not consistent enough.
Right. It goes.
Jeremy Grant.
They have to fall back on the defensive identity. That's their strength, and then hope that Paul George can score 40 points a night.
Yeah.
Which,
they were built around Paul George being transcendent in a defense that was like bordering on transcendent.
Right.
And when Russ stresses out because nothing's going right,
he
kind of gets aggressive and in the wrong ways.
I like you framing it as stressing out. Like he stresses out, and that's what
I think that's how he reacts. Is that he goes very much like I'm going to win this game.
Right.
I have to win this game,
Yeah.
which is like you can't. You're not going to win this game by yourself.
Right. And also, it seems like Paul George may be having a shoulder issue too, which is factoring into all of this. So
yeah, it's always interesting when Russell Westbrook has these kind of like statistical feats. He obviously had 20-20-20, just I believe a day after Nipsey Hussle died, and it's like he made a big point of it, and it was a nice moment. But there's always that kind of nagging thing in the back of your mind, like. Why aren't you like this all the time? Or like,
I think it would be I think it's just like exhaustion.
Yeah. Because
he does have to pull a lot of weight for the rest of his team. And, their defense has been good all year. And that's also kind of exhausting.
All right, let's move on to a team that's peaking here, the Utah Jazz. In the past 12, they're 11-1. The funny thing is, though, I cannot have envisioned an easier stretch of games than the Utah Jazz have played over the past couple. I'm going to read this off to you. They've had Phoenix, Minnesota, Brooklyn, Washington, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, Phoenix again, Los Angeles, Washington again, Charlotte, Phoenix again.
That's basically like, go get that 4 seed, go get the 5 seed.
Right. So I'm a little bit torn here. I think things are coming together as they often do late in the season for the Utah Jazz. The problem is just this is cake. There's really nothing to be gleaned from here other than they're just kind of taking care of business.
I think that contrasts with the next team that we're going to talk about, which is the Nets. They've had a horrifically tough schedule.
Yeah.
And I've watched their games, and, the things that they have struggled with all season, last night, turnovers and rebounds. It's tough when you're playing teams that are like that excel and are good in forcing those. But I think that it's not themselves that has slumped. I truly think it's the schedule. It's been brutal.
With the Jazz, that does make me not trust them as much, maybe, because while things may be coming together and improving, there's no barometer. It's not a proper way to measure them. I feel like going into the playoffs.
I will
now
say
getting to the 5 seed instead of where they could have played Portland, like that's huge, because then Portland's obviously with the use of Nurkic injury, they're very vulnerable.
I will say with the Jazz, it is good to know that they are not a team that plays down and plays up to their opponent. And it's nice that they're consistent enough to win the games that they have to win.
Yeah.
Or they should win, I should say.
Yeah, I'm a little wait and see on the Jazz here. And in terms of the Nets, they're the past 15, they're 7-8. As Haley mentioned, they do have a pretty rough schedule. I guess for me, it was just the game against the Raptors only confirmed that they can only do so much against certain teams.
Yeah.
And now the Raptors are probably a top 5 team in the league, if not higher than that, perhaps top 4. It's just they have so much to throw at them, and it seemed like the Nets were trying to shoot them out of the game, but the Raptors would just keep going to either Kawhi Leonard or more often Pascal Siakam in the post, just for these easy buckets, because it was usually like a Spencer Dinwiddie because they were going with a 3-guard lineup, or someone like our guy Rodney Kyrks.
Yeah,
Rodions Kyrks.
Kyrks.
Close enough. Or just Kawhi Leonard in isolation. It's just like it was just a little too easy.
The Raptors are so adaptable. It contrasted how much the Nets aren't. But again, it's the same thing that I was saying with the schedule. Like, this is who they have been, and I still think that's impressive. Granted, I don't think that's enough to, if they do end up playing the Raptors. It's just not enough.
It's a nice story, for one, but it's also one that I thought with the right matchup could make an interesting first-round series.
But the Raptors are not the right matchup.
No, not at all. I think the Sixers would have been a nice matchup because they have trouble defending guards like D'Angelo Russell. And that would have been very interesting to me. I still think the Sixers would have won, but something like that I think could have pushed their season a little further.
Yeah, it's just interesting because we talked about, I think it was last week, about just teams that can upset other ones. And it's interesting to think about in contrast to the NCAA tournament, just because a lot of times if you just get hot from 3, then you're a 12 seed and you're all of a sudden in the Elite 8.
Minnesota, kill me.
There you go.
With a team like the Nets, you're going to have to beat them 4 times.
Yeah.
You're going to have to beat the Raptors 4 times. And it's a tough matchup for anybody, let alone a team that doesn't really have a lot of size, is going to have to shoot you out of the game. So it's interesting to see. I think it's been a positive season overall here. We'll see, I guess, what happens in free agency going forward. That's it for me, I think. Anything else, guys? Haley?
Just going to put my contacts in.
Yeah?
Let's do it.
Go out of here shooting.
Any more shade to throw? Anyone?
At who?
Paolo, you want to talk some more shit? Meet you outside after this?
You.
All right, that's it for this week. We'll be back next week when we'll have some playoff matchups to discuss.
Basketball is very good. Basketball is very good.